Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Meat and Poison with Matt.
And this is Andy.
And today we are talking about the celebrated French designer, Yves Saint Laurent.
Indeed. And you're going to jump in with a little bit of his life, I think.
Yeah.
Or his childhood, perhaps.
Childhood, yeah. Well, he was born in Algeria, which was a French colony back in the day, and I think 1936, am I wrong? I think that's about right. Today's the 1st of August, is it not? And here's to Yves. We are drinking mint tea.
Indeed.
Very Moroccan style. Matt will explain why.
Well, because he spent a huge part of his life in Morocco. It seemed to be a big love of his, although, as we discovered, he'd born in Algeria, but it seemed to be that the northern African culture kind of became an inspiration for him much more when he became an expat.
Yeah.
So
to Paris. Or
no,
the other way
when he
around.
became an expat from
yes.
Paris to... Yeah, I suppose he was doubly an expat.
That
really,
doubly an
because
expat.
He always wanted to move. I think he sort of longed to leave Algeria.
Yeah, and to live in Paris and to be...
left very young. Very young. I mean, he moved.
Oh yeah.
But love of fashion from early on. Well, love of fashion and theatre and the arts really, but very much the performance of art and the presentation of beauty, I think, was his greatest love.
See, you more of a fashion guy, and you used to live in Paris and work there, and you more in the know.
Basically,
for
Eve.
Me, yeah, basically Eve.
It's just me and Eve.
Just like them in the biz. You know, my phone never rang.
I should point out I no longer work in fashion at all.
No. And I never did.
Didn't quite achieve Eve's career.
The point is, I am probably making like a huge faux pas by being dressed in, I don't know, whatever I'm wearing is definitely not Yves Saint Laurent. I'm not naming labels. But what really struck me in my research, and we talked about where he was born and then he moved and then he became the first assistant of Dior. And then at 21, after Dior's sudden death, he starts to run the whole house.
Yeah. Which quite prophetic, Dior.
Yeah.
Because he named Yves Mathieu Saint Laurent, as he was then known, as his successor just 1 year before. When Dior died very young, I think he was 52 or something.
Yeah.
So a very young age to start naming your successor, but then he dies a year later. So
but I mean, the promotion, the stratospheric move, like jump to, not even jump, what's the word I'm looking for? Leap to success is, he only worked there for 4 years. Well, I mean, until...
a meteoric rise through the ranks,
I
think we could say.
So he must have done something right and good.
Well, I think Dior found in him just a talent and a love that was akin to his own, for a love for fashion and fabrics and using them. Although my opinion of Yves Saint Laurent, which will probably be controversial, is that he wasn't really made for the world of haute couture that he was introduced to.
Well, explain to the listeners and the viewers, some of them are not exactly fashionistas, what haute couture means. I had to find out about that.
Well, haute couture is the very, very top, the very pinnacle of fashion, and it's changed enormously since since Yves Saint Laurent was training in it, at which time it was the way that most wealthy women bought their clothes, was to go twice a year. Which is not Paris. The case now that people would buy it so prolifically.
Not exactly a hardship, but
nowadays buy but there are people nowadays obviously who do still buy haute couture, but an haute couture gown nowadays is upwards of £20,000 or euros. Incredible costs. It was slightly different back then. It was slightly more accessible, still very expensive. But yeah, fashion was really led by the wealthy. in those times. And I think the reason I say that Yves was not meant for this world is that his interest lay so much more with modern culture and with street style.
But I think not just by the wealthy, I think, but also by the upper classes.
Yeah, absolutely,
So
upper class wealthy. Yeah, so I mean, we were talking about fashion shows. Dior, for example, would take his collections to Windsor Castle to show to the young princesses at the time, and they were the style makers. They were the people that people wanted to emulate at the time, because the people buying these fashions were from that class group, and that's really where fashion was happening. Was right at the top of the kind of class scale and the wealth scale, and haute couture was a much larger business.
So why was he not then cut out for that world?
Well, as I said, I think because he was so much more interested in modernity, and haute couture, particularly at that time, Dior famously had brought about the new look, which were these huge voluminous dresses and big skirts and lots of fabric, and a real return to femininity.
Yeah.
And it wasn't modern, really. It was harking back to sort of turn of the century and big ball gowns, and I think Yves obviously loved learning his craft. He obviously adored Dior as a craftsman, but I don't think that style really set well with him, because what he wanted was modernity. He wanted to see what was happening next, and he's designing or takes over the house of Dior at this incredible moment in fashion history where it's the birth of the teenager, it's the birth of hippie culture, really. He takes over sort of end of the 50s, and
I'm going to be silent most of the podcast because we're just listening to him.
And yeah, it doesn't fit with the customers anymore. A lot of the couture houses start shutting, and he tries to do something a bit new, and actually he ends up getting let go by the house.
Well, not just because he was sort of attempting to do something new, but hardly had he worked for Dior, I think, for how many years?
I think
Just a couple,
2 or 3.
Not very many years, when he was called up to fight with
the Algerian War.
the Algerian War for the French.
Yes.
It didn't really go as planned, thank God. He wasn't recruited to the army. It didn't go past the training camp. He had a major nervous breakdown and ended up in hospital and lost his job at Dior. And then I think his partner Pierre Berger, that stayed with him throughout his life, visited him in hospital, and at some point, this is how I learned about it. He just said, "We need to start our own brand, and you will manage it."
Yes.
That was Yves'
I think
words.
He was let go whilst he was in the hospital having fairly.
We're still talking about a man under 30.
Yeah, I mean, not even close to 30. I think at this point he's sort of mid-20s.
People were so much more mature than they are today. We are nearly 40 and we're doing a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, he's really a rough hand. I gotta say, he's nearly 40.
Well,
hang on.
I am. He gets very upset.
Nobody's gonna believe that. No, he had
we're wearing lots of makeup.
A really rough hand.
A lot.
It kind of, as you said, this meteoric rise to success, and then this horrendous treatment in the army, this nervous breakdown, and then Dior fire him whilst he's basically still in the hospital. And his response is, I mean, he's a pretty hard nut. He just says, well, then we have to create our own.
Yeah. And create he did.
And a very fortuitous time in fashion to be starting something new.
Shall we then talk about him do you want to talk about him as a designer or as a businessman, or maybe as both? Because I think that these two go hand in hand with Yves Saint Laurent, because he was really good at...
Pierre Berger was really the businessman.
Okay.
I don't think you can take that away from him, because he was certainly... I think without Pierre there would be no Yves.
Was it? Was he like René for Celine?
Yes, exactly. He is Celine's René.
But wait, but Celine's René died before Celine.
True.
See, that's where they
True.
changed
But-
roles.
Yeah, this is true.
So okay, well that's fine. But no matter who made those decisions, we're going to mention them in more detail. But I thought they were quite brilliant, to be honest,
Absolutely.
and quite gutsy for the time.
The managing of it, well, I mean, I think you're talking about the decision to open the pret-à-porter, so the Rive Gauche brand.
You need to explain that to the viewers because we're well researched.
Rive Gauche was the name of his ready-to-wear brand, and he was really the first couture house
Ready to wear, much less expensive,
to launch a ready-to-wear
much
collection.
more accessible, right? Not 20.
So it was
grand.
closed as nowadays you could walk into a shop and take off the peg, which no other couture brand was doing because they just did the couture where you go for 5 or 6 fittings or 3 or 4 fittings and
Basically spent together
tens of thousands. And this was, the idea that you could go and choose your pieces, and also the idea that you would not be buying a whole look. And so I think it was also giving some power to the consumer to choose their style a little bit more, as opposed to going in and saying, I'll take look number 4 from the hat to the shoes and everything, to just being able to buy a jacket.
But right now we're sort of stating these facts and they seem like nothing to anybody. But back in the 60s, it really wasn't a done thing.
It wasn't a done thing. It was definitely not a done thing for a couture house. I mean, there were shops obviously coming about. I think he did it first. A few of the others was planning it at the same time, and so there were a few others that sort of followed quite close behind. And I don't think it was necessarily just copying him. I think it had been a movement that was happening. People were aware that street style, that the people wanted fashion, and that a new class of people wanted fashionable clothes but couldn't afford couture. So it was a sensible business decision, certainly. But I do think a sensible business decision. I do think from a creative point of view, it was also very much Yves' dream to be able to influence fashion in that way, on a much wider
and to
scale.
see maybe his designs on the street.
Yeah, I think one of the things he said apparently was that he wished he'd designed the blue jeans, because this sort of iconic item that everybody wears. So he wasn't interested in exclusivity. He was interested in legacy, I think.
Well, speaking of legacy and iconic items, shall we mention some of the other introductions that were the doings of his hand?
Yours, I think you're one of your favorite items.
Are you talking about like the
smoking? No?
Oh well, yeah. No, I just thought you would talk about the design, and I would just think not, because I know sod all about this.
No, but you've done some research.
No, I've done some research. Obviously, what I really found fascinating is that back in the 60s, men wore dinner jackets. They still do. Trousers. They smoked cigarettes or cigars, and they talked about politics in their little clubs. And women were just like, in their little dresses and sort of chattering about. And then even I think he says that in one of his statements that
I
he
think
just
that might have been what was expected of women.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he says that in one of his statements, that it's not just about the elegance, but giving the women the power. And so I think that's how I understood him. He gave them the power by giving them le smoking, which is the dinner jacket, the trousers. Maybe brought them back again, but after Dior completely eliminated them, and gave them the power to smoke cigarettes and go and talk about politics around.
Yeah, I don't think we can credit Yves Saint Laurent with the entire.
Obviously, he didn't change the entire
of the
culture,
60s, but I think he
was a strong.
He gave a look to it.
Yeah, he gave a look to it, and he
gave
represented some of the women that are still to this day, not just the elegance icons like Françoise Hardy or Catherine Deneuve, but also quite strong and opinionated women.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he had a respect for
who
women.
had full careers.
He had a respect for women and the emancipation of women, and was very interested and very moved by by the feminist movement and wanted to visually support that by these sort of offering androgynous looks, offering a masculine take on looks, as well as beautiful clothes at the same time. I mean, I was super interested in the research. I'd never heard about the yeah music movement in the 60s in France. That's because one hears so much about the swinging 60s in London and everything, and that the French equivalent was this
the instrumentality.
Was this yeah music, which was François Hardy and
François Hardy, Sylvie Vartan. So the two women he started
who he
dressing.
Then dressed a lot in videos of not videos, live performances
on stage,
of them. Which was kind of the French version of the swinging 60s, and Yves Saint Laurent is really the French sort of what's the word, touch point in fashion for that movement and the beginning of that, and the very very short skirts, and then he started to take things like the Mondrian dress, which is one of his most famous pieces, to take modern art that was happening at the time. But
what you're trying to, I think, to drive at is the also a new, quite genius decision to promote his brand by starting to dress the new aristocracy of the time, the stratum of people that other people look to. Celebrities. François Hardy. Immediately they saw them on stage wearing something by Saint Laurent. The items were sold out, and then Catherine Deneuve, obviously one of his nearly models, as in someone who.
It was sort of followed suit by, for example, Givenchy with Audrey Hepburn at the sort of same time was happening, but it was a movement that was growing, and Yves Saint Laurent certainly latched onto that idea as well. That idea of branding, isn't it? Which I think is my meat for Yves Saint Laurent, is kind of his ability, or this idea that to build a brand around the clothing that doesn't just depend on the designs. Because conversely, my poison would be, I'm not a massive fan of a lot of his 70s designs. I don't particularly like that style. They were all, not all, a lot of them are quite outrageous, a lot of the sort of fringed Afghan stuff and crocodile leather with mink on it and various things going on. Not my taste, but the idea of he created this brand around himself, or Pierre Berger did as well, and to create a world of around a brand, which I don't think was done so excellently again until Tom Ford took over at Gucci, really.
Do you know what really struck me? Because I was trying to look for my meat and poison. I haven't been able to find anything poisonous about Saint Laurent, maybe for the simple reason that I really fell for the man. Because it sort of touched me, because I thought, okay, that man had no childhood, no youth. He started working very early. Then at 21 to start running any business, much less one of probably the biggest fashion house in the world, is no mean feat. And then basically all he did in his life was just work. And there is a quote that I found in one of my in one of the podcasts I listened to by him, when he was asked about what he would like to do maybe after his work is done, maybe after he retired, and he said, well, I would like to travel maybe more, and but also I would like to sleep. And as a person who likes to sleep, I felt like, and then he was asked about what his idea of happiness is, and he said, un grand lit, a big bed, which to me, it just sounded like, that man really put everything, sort of set everything on his career and his work life, and had barely any time to be maybe, alone, to rest, to be with his friends.
Obsessed with legacy, though. I think that's what he
probably...
He wanted to leave a mark. I mean, he said at one point when he was quite young, one day my my name will be in flames on the
Yeah.
Champs-Élysées. And I think, an incredibly driven man that drove him probably to his own destruction, because I think if you're that temperament, you're never really going to be satisfied with what you've achieved, because I think what he was trying to achieve was to leave this indelible mark on the world, and he certainly has on the world of fashion, but I don't think that kind of character is ever really fulfilled. And he ended up, sadly, at the end of his life, with a drug and alcohol problem that really...
Yeah, but that's what I was trying to sort of lead to, because one of his quotes that really pierced my heart was when he said, I have absolutely no time for sometimes even cinema, because he said, je fais des robes et je dors, which is I make dresses and then I sleep.
Yeah.
And to me, because, one imagines the life of a fashion designer, something really fabulous, surrounded by beautiful people, parties and champagne and celebrations, but it's actually a lot of work. I mean, it's basically
it's
just...
got worse nowadays, and there's a big thing with the coronavirus recently, and change in people's work patterns. Within the fashion industry as a whole, there seems to be a movement to try and push back against this constant output that's needed.
But we definitely are not wrapping up on a sad note, but we've sort of touched upon, I think, the democratization and the popularization of fashion. And we both loved it, I think. We both loved that idea, but what do you think of today's like American Vogue, maybe making that magazine less artsy and more industry? Or maybe the Oscar ceremony being basically a fashion show today, where the designers are just waiting
you
for...
have more of a problem with that than I do.
I don't have a problem with that. I just don't like the phrase, who are you wearing? I don't have a problem with the beautiful actresses wearing beautiful dresses. I have absolutely no problem with that. I understand.
No, but I think it's kind of part of the fun, because if you're going to choose to wear these incredible creations, then why shouldn't people ask you about it?
Fine.
Because I
find
find
that
really
funny.
Annoys me a little bit when some people are like, well, why are you asking me who I'm wearing? It's like, well, if you don't want to be asked about your dress, then why are you wearing an incredible artistic creation from Atelier Versace or whatever?
Wait.
Because
you can say, what designer is your dress? What designer are you wearing?
Specifically about the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just like, it sounds like this American corporate speak to me, when everything is just going forward and it's just like the words that mean nothing. A lot of the time.
But I wonder what will happen to that kind of culture of celebrities, or particularly female celebrities, being linked with fashion and being clothes horses in the next few years, because there's certainly a backlash against it. That you shouldn't expect, and rightfully so, you shouldn't just expect that every single female actor is going to be an advocate for fashion.
No.
And it has sort of been expected of them in the past, I think, and I think that will change. I think there will always be people who...
Wasn't there a ceremony, was it this year or was it last year, when they all agreed to... No, they all agreed to wear something that's already been worn by them.
Oh, okay, no, I didn't see that.
Wait, am I just like making it up?
There was the one where they all wore black.
No, that was for the Golden Globes, and that was for a different reason. But then there was one where they decided to stand for, maybe, recycling. Sustainable fashion. And they all, obviously every single woman there owns at least one dress she could wear again.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. And I thought that actually was quite it's still a statement. It's still a statement made by celebrities who probably, should just make movies and shut the fuck up. But to get my personal opinion. So, shall we talk just a little bit more about his legacy, or a little bit about his legacy?
Yeah, I think he wanted to, as I said, I wanted to leave a mark, but he was also quite generous in, he, as we said, was an expat in Morocco and gifted to the city the Jardin Mjorelle, which
was going to be turned into a property project, and they just bought the land and turned it into the beautiful Jardin, which you visited. I haven't
visited. Yeah, it is very beautiful.
You sound a bit, underwhelmed.
I think it was so hyped up. For one, I found Marrakesh a very, very stressful city, I have to say.
Yeah. It's the high expectations.
It was a beautiful place to be, but it is quite a stressful city to visit. And it was lovely going to the Jardin Mjorelle. They're very lovely, but then they talked about so much, and it's this kind of big point to hit in Marrakesh, and they're not that huge, and they're not that overwhelming.
So he wanted basically more.
I was expecting like a park.
He wanted like a Mariah Carey show on steroids.
No, I was expecting some enormous park, and it's not. It's a very beautiful garden, but it's on a smaller scale than I had thinking.
That's not his recommendation for later.
Worth a visit.
Worth a visit, but not.
He also, what he and Pierre Berger both did was obsessively document and archive everything that they did, almost from the very beginning, which is a great gift to the world culturally. And they then had the Fondation Pierre Berger and Yves Saint Laurent, which in 2017 was then turned into the Musée Yves Saint Laurent, which is at his old couture house. And they have, I went to when it was still just a fondation, when you could go if you were a student and you were allowed, and they showed you some of these clothes. I mean, they have tens of thousands of articles of clothing and drawings and all sorts of pieces from his life. And I haven't yet been to the museum, the Yves Saint Laurent Museum, but I think it's a great thing to have left to the world when you knew. I think he was always aware that he was something special. He was a genius, and that people were going to want to look back on him and see what he did. So I'm just going to start documenting everything I do. Hence our podcast.
This is why we're doing this. It's all about the legacy in this room. So shall we wrap up on some recs?
Sure, some recs.
What would you like to recommend? Because mine is a bit more pedestrian than yours.
There's a wonderful documentary which is available on YouTube, actually. I mean, in like 9 small parts.
Yeah.
But it's called 5 Avenue Marceau. It's at number 5 Avenue Marceau, which is the address of the Yves Saint Laurent atelier. It's a wonderful documentary about him, filmed whilst he was still alive. Some fabulous...
Starring Catherine Deneuve.
Catherine Deneuve is in it a lot. She's a fiery character. I love her.
She runs that house.
She really... there is no shit going past Catherine.
She takes no prisoners.
I do really love that woman. She's
fabulous.
Yeah.
She could run a country.
Also, like, age-defying somehow. Despite the fact that she smokes about 800 cigarettes.
No, she quit, but like, what's the point? I mean, she quit how old is she now? I don't know. She quit at like 75 or something.
I would not want to get... You think she's over 70?
No, she quit at 75.
Yeah, but do you think she's older than 75?
Oh, is that... Wait. Edit that out.
We're not tagging Catherine.
Come on, but she's that generation. I mean, Meryl is 71.
Yeah, that's true. I think she's older than Meryl.
Ooh.
This
is going to be cut out of this episode. Anyway, actually, it's not about her. We're gonna cut it out anyway. My recommendation: so watch that documentary, which I watched too, and I really liked. Is it subtitled in English for some people who don't speak Catherine Deneuve's speed French?
Which is also me.
Yeah, mine is a bit worldly and like well, not materialistic, but more material, because you know that I am a madman when it comes to scents.
Yeah,
I am quite.
He's talking perfumes.
Yeah, fragrances.
Fragrances.
Do you like that word? Yeah. Perfumes. Yes, and one of his perfumes, which was I think when did it originate? Some 60s or 70s, with a very gutsy photo of a naked
Yeah, I think
Saint Laurent on a sofa.
Of him is 71, so it must be.
So around that time. So I mean, the perfume has been around for a while, and it's one of my favorite perfumes. My recommendation is actually not one of the 75 kinds of that perfume, but the real McCoy, which is Eau de Parfum, La Nuit de l'Homme. Benjamin, if you're watching, you know what I'm talking about. So, shall we announce our next episode?
I think you should, because it's definitely...
Why? Well, he might be right about that. I will probably be doing a lot of talking in the next episode because I'm obsessed with that man. His name is Roger Federer. The next episode is on the 8th of August, His Majesty's birthday of tennis. And we're going to talk about lots of interesting things. We actually haven't decided exactly how we're going to focus that episode, but we're really looking forward to it.
Well, I definitely have to do some research to catch up with you.
I basically live for Roger.
In terms of Roger.
Thank you very much for listening and watching. This has been Meat and Poison.
Yeah, thank you. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye.
Really interesting person.